So, good evening. This is Peter Larson here calling from Ottawa. If you're here for the seminar on why it is that the Arab and Muslim countries are not more supportive of the Palestinians, you're at the right spot. And I have with me Graham Fuller. Graham, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
Um, I'm going to introduce Graham in a second, but I remind people that OFIP operates from unceded Indigenous territory here in Ottawa. In recognition of which an OFIP board member makes a contribution to Inspire, which was formerly the National Aboriginal Achievement Foundation, and it is a national Indigenous registered charity that invests in the education of Indigenous young people. So I'm going to start off, Graham, by introducing you a little bit. Maybe I'll ask you to fill out a little bit. I met Graham 3, 4, 5 years ago. Graham is a retired senior CIA officer, worked in a number of countries around the world. And then after moving back to the States, he became vice chair of the National Intelligence Council. He particularly spent time in Turkey, so he knows a lot about the Middle East. And Graham, why don't you just tell us how it comes that a retired CIA officer is talking to the Ottawa Forum on Israel-Palestine.
Well, you're correct. I was the CIA operations officer serving, I don't know, 20, 25 years in Germany, Turkey for 3 years, Lebanon for 2 years, Saudi Arabia for 3 years, Yemen for 2 years, Afghanistan. I was chief of station in Afghanistan for 3 years, and then Hong Kong for 4 years. So quite a spread, mainly over Asia. I particularly have a love of foreign languages, which I guess is a gift, a lucky gift to have. So I worked a lot on languages while I was there and speak, pretty good Arabic and Turkish. And I majored in Russian when I was at university, which fits in with the contemporary geopolitical world. And then after I was then appointed vice chairman of the National Council at the CIA, which is responsible for long-range forecasting in different areas of the world. After 4 years of that, I think I went on to the Rand Corporation, which is one of the granddaddies of think tanks that a bit more conservative now than I would look as I look back upon it. And then after I left Rand, I moved to Canada because I was simply fed up after years and years of exposure firsthand to U.S. policies. And it wasn't CIA policies as such, it was American policies writ large in the Middle East.
Now, we don't have time to go into it at great length, but you ended up kind of ideologically kind of separating yourself a little bit from the CIA and the U.S. imperial project. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, yes. That's one of the reasons for having moved to Canada.
Well, we're glad you did, and we're glad you're with us tonight, particularly given your both your perspective and your experience in the Middle East. Graham, I want to start off just broadly. I don't know how many times I got asked when I was speaking at various fora. I don't know how many times I was asked why it is that the Muslim countries don't support the Arabs, or why don't the Arab countries support the Palestinians, or whatever. And to a Canadian doing this from a long ways away, it seems kind of like a reasonable question. We sort of expect that they would all hang out together. So give us just at the broad level why that's not the case.
10-second answer is they're too scared to do so.
Scared in what sense?
Scared in the sense that, well, we can go into this. The origins of these contemporary Arab states are very important here because almost none of them achieved independence on their own right, but simply were leaders implanted by MI6 or CIA or other Western powers. so that they're very beholden to those Western powers. It's truly still a holdover from colonial era. They are
Now,
not, they're,
Graham, that is true for Jordan and Syria, and so it's not true for Turkey. It's not true for Iran. It's not
it's
true for
not,
Egypt, right? I mean, it's true. Some of them were actually created in the wake of the Sykes-Picot and all that sort of stuff, right?
yeah, but I mean, the basic they are not, I hesitate to use the word, but I'm not sure that they would be considered fully legitimate states, if you would,
Hmm.
in the sense of having, compared to, say, Iran that you just mentioned, which had one of the genuine modern political revolutions in the developing world. And Turkey, of course, has been independent, fought against the West in its own right. But otherwise, I mean, even Egypt, I would argue, is still pretty heavily beholden both to the money and the power of the West. I'm hard put, except maybe these strange, crazy, brave Houthis in Yemen. I'm hard put to think of any other state which is willing to speak out, put their money where their mouth is, um, in the way that Iran and Turkey, and as I'm sure most of your readers, your followers know, these two countries are not Arab states.
Right. So just in terms of how we're going to proceed here tonight, just for people who have now joined, we have 85 people on the line. Um, I'm with Graham. I'm going to successively ask him to help us understand the interests and the pressure, the contradictory pressures on countries one after the other: Turkey, Saudi, Egypt. Who am I missing? Iran. Um, uh, yeah, so understand why it is they do what they do, what their interests are. For people in the audience, you can ask questions by putting it in the chat. And my colleague Grafton Ross is in the background. He will be monitoring the chat. Or you can put it in the Q&A function, or you can raise your hand directly. And we will try to manage questions as best possible. But for the first 25 minutes or so, I'll be carrying on a conversation with Graham. And then we turn it over to the audience, to you for asking, for you to ask your questions of him. So Graham, let's turn. You served for some time in Ankara, in Turkey.
In
Um,
Istanbul.
Istanbul, okay. Graham, I know that Mr. Erdogan has made very fiery speeches denouncing Israel, denouncing Netanyahu, calling him a war criminal, inviting President Abbas to speak at the Turkish parliament. But at the same time, I know that for a long time, Turkey was still selling oil to Israel, and so the rhetoric didn't seem to be being followed by action. So help us understand what are the push and pull. Why is it that they're doing that?
Okay, well, Peter, first of all, just let me very quickly say we're talking about profiles and portraits of many important countries here. I'm going to give you my best subjective personal view. I apologize in advance to any listeners from those countries who disagree with me, but I'm going to try to give as unvarnished and honest opinion as I can give in ways that help me understand those countries. I'm not saying I'm right, and as I say, I apologize if people take offense of some of those things. Um, so, um, so we were going to start with Turkey,
Yeah,
right?
let's start with Turkey.
Yeah. Turkey is quite an unusual state in the sense that it's come away from several hundred years of being the main Middle Eastern empire in the Middle East. So it has a particular clout, even though they were the caliph of, if you will, of the Muslim world of Islam for a very long time. So they have a particular clout, particular voice in affairs that even though they're a relatively secular country, they have highly ambitious view of what modern Turkey should be. And in this sense, Turkey, starting about 20 years ago, suddenly said, look, we're not just a Muslim country. We're a Mediterranean country. We're a Balkan country. We are a NATO country. We are part of the of the broader Middle East. We're a Central Asian country because we're part of the Turkic world. It has this highly expansive view of its place in the world and its importance in the world. And it jumps around in this sense. I think it plays all sides and off against the middle. You're right, it's not predictable in all the choices that it makes, but it claims and is insisting on being a player in all these various fora, and that leads to great inconsistency. Today, they want to improve with Israel, but tomorrow maybe make up with the U.S. The day after that, stop pissing off NATO. The day after that, maybe making up with Putin. Now starting to work with China. It's a grab bag, but it's a very serious heavyweight player.
But what would you say are the main pressures on Turkey? First of all, to be critical of Israel, and will be the main pressures for it to step back and not do anything concrete.
Well, ideologically, I would have to say that it's probably one of the more outspoken Muslim countries, Islamic country, in the sense that they take Palestine and the Palestinian situation and Israel very seriously, and know that when Turkey speaks about these issues, that the rest of the world is going to listen and pay some considerable attention. At the same time, as I suggested earlier, I don't think they want to cut their ties irrevocably with anybody forever, but they're willing to piss off seriatim, one after another, any number of other major players as befits their own national. But Turkey is the party in power is calls itself an Islamic or Islamist. It's moderate in its Islam, but very definitely oriented towards Islam, and that includes key Islamic issues, of which Palestine has to rank very high in the list.
Um, I have the impression that the street in Turkey is very pro-Palestinian. Is that the correct assessment?
Yes, absolutely. Turkey is it's Turkish Islam is very moderate, but it's very widespread, very deep in the culture, and probably maybe getting deeper with time, despite the fact that the great founder of modern Turkey, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, was a staunch secularist, and Turkey to this day says we are secular, but they are also very religious behind the scenes.
Does that Ataturk, that Turkish revolution, which is now 100 years old, does that lead them to be naturally supportive of the Palestinians? Does that play into that national liberation model, or is that not very much that's at play now?
Well, no, I think it does play into that. Turkey is very much sympathized with Muslim causes, and let's not forget that Palestine, when Turkey was the Ottoman Empire for several hundred years, it presided over huge swaths of territory, and that included Palestine. So the Palestinian issue was very much on the Turkish table, the agenda going way back. Even though it's shifted in its views on this, Palestine is viewed as central geographically, geopolitically, and religiously.
All right, let's move. Let's leave that for the moment. We'll go on to others, and then open the floor to questions as we go ahead. Let's look at the Saudis. Now, the Saudis are an interesting situation. I'll tell you a little bit that I know, but you know definitely a lot more than I. Of course, the Saudis have this huge pot of money. They came into power with the aid of the British at the end of the First World War. They have been a key American ally in the region, and are the key money. I guess until the Gulf countries started to have a lot of money, they've been financially very powerful, and they've had this sort of double dance with Israel. On the one hand, they're tiptoeing around the normalization with Israel, which the Americans want, but they keep saying as well that we can't do it unless there is a credible path to statehood for the Palestinians. Now, if you were MBS, what are his interests in this? Does he really wish the Palestinians would just dry up and go away? What? What drives
Yeah,
him?
MBS's number one interest, number two, three, four, and five, of course, are all staying in power and keeping Saudi Arabia itself as a country powerful, which is fundamentally, well, on two bases. Obviously, you mentioned oil first. It's got a ton of oil that helps keep it rich. It helps keep the country operating at a fairly significant economic level. But it still is, of course, the center of the two holiest places in Islamic
Does
culture.
that give them some leverage? The fact that Medina and Mecca are they have first of all they have millions of people going there, right, from all over the Islamic world.
That's right, going there on Hajj. Um, I'm going to give you a sharper subjective view on some of this. I think when you compare a country like Saudi Arabia to, let's say, Turkey or Iran, which we will maybe be talking about, I don't see any gravitas, any weight, any seriousness, depth, historical, culture, deep involvement in international politics. I see a country that's a bit glitzy, maybe nice to say at a five-star hotel, maybe investing in impressive certain kinds of infrastructure that the country needs, but you don't have a sense in Saudi Arabia of a country that's deeply, historically, culturally invested in that part of the world that gives it any serious clout. The clout they have is all money. No, it's not. There's worse clout than money, but that tends to be where it's at.
So you're
And
making an interesting distinction for me there. That sort if I think of the other countries that we're going to put as potentially as Turkey, Iran or Persia, and Egypt, these are 1,000-year-old civilizations that have a lot behind them. Whereas Saudi kind of emerged from the desert with the oil. I mean, there were Bedouins there before, but it was nothing. It wasn't a 1,000-year-old civilization. And so you're saying that that plays differently in terms of its ideological weight or its political weight.
oh, absolutely. You said it exactly right, Peter. Um, Money, when you have a lot of money, people play up to you. People come from all over the world to try to get money from Saudi Arabia. But I don't look to Saudi Arabia for any much creative thinking or even creative leadership. I think they are, especially MBS, is deeply focused on his own power, his own seat, his own longevity in the region. But I don't think it garners much respect from the region, except for people that want to come to Saudi Arabia and hope to pick up some money and take it back home with them. This may change over time. I mean, I think just even seeing MBS in power, he's probably not the world's nicest guy, but most leaders are not. And we know he has one at least very bloody murder on his public bloody murder on his hands from the murder of Khashoggi, the prominent Saudi newspaperman who offended MBS. But so I'm just saying I don't think it is attracting thoughtful people, statesmen, statecraft. You just don't see, I mean, even on the internet, for example, you don't see serious interviews with Saudi leaders. I don't know that they have much to offer except throw money into the pot, and that can be very helpful if it
I have
comes
the
to
impression that
rebuilding.
a lot of the Saudi leaders have been trained in U.S. universities in any event. The ones who speak on television speak English like you and I do. Uh,
That's right. That's a new development, maybe 20, 25 years.
right. If you have enough money, you
Impressive.
can buy your way into Harvard. That's yeah. Um,
Yeah.
how do you read this delicate balance between Saudi saying that we they haven't said exactly, hinting that they might normalize with Israel, but they're only on condition that the Palestinians have a state. Is that just how deep is that? What does that reflect?
Well, in one sense, you cynically, you might say it's an easy bet. because nobody sees peace on the horizon right now in the Arab world. Far from it. I mean, it's worse than it's ever been, by far worse than it's ever been.
What's been worse?
So,
What's
uh,
worse?
so I don't think that MBS is going to be called upon to
To
pay
deliver.
its dues on this issue at all. But on the other hand, he does not want to be left outside of the game, left out hors de combat, as it were. I think he'd like to be consulted, invited to the White House, and above all else, he's got to play to some degree Washington's game, at least seem to be playing Washington's game, if he's going to get the kind of security support that the country feels it needs. And as you know, this has been an issue very recently with Saudi Arabia's new security arrangements with Pakistan, which is a nuclear country. Obviously, Saudi is not a nuclear country. I think it's evolving, and I
Right.
don't want to be dismissive of Riyadh entirely, but it's going to be a long haul. I don't think they have a good feel for the situation. And finally, at this point, I would say it would be almost suicidal if Saudi Arabia decided to just tomorrow to join the Abraham Accords or whatever else in any way that would facilitate Israel's strength. I think he's smart enough not to do that.
When you
He
say
won't do it.
suicidal, you mean in terms of internal revolt?
Internal revolt and acceptance of in within the Muslim world for Saudi credibility. I think people,
Remind us, I've forgotten. What are the countries that have joined? The ones that have joined the Abraham Accord were actually countries that weren't really like Morocco and the UAE.
Morocco, Bahrain, I think the UAE. Uh, I don't know about Qatar. I'm not sure about Qatar.
Okay,
But anyway, three or four countries, not terribly significant.
right.
Morocco is not a meaningless player, but it's far from the scene. And there's nobody else out there right now. So I think it would be very costly in the end to Saudi Arabia's Islamic legitimacy. And they
Its
placed
pretensions to be a leader in the Muslim world would be damaged.
that absolutely.
Right, right. Although I see that someone put out, and I think it's true, that Saudi has been dealing secretly with Israel for a long time, as all these countries have been doing that under the table.
Well, dealing secretly is a luxury. It's when you come out of the closet that it starts to cost.
Right. Okay. Let's turn our eyes now to Egypt. Um, oh, I see Grafton has put the list of the countries that have signed the Abraham Accords in the chat box. Thank you, Grafton. Let's turn to Egypt. Now we got a number of different things going on here. First of all, Egypt has this history of actually controlling Gaza from 1947 to 1948 to 1967. At that time, the Palestinians were happy to have Egyptian protection, and they were under the Egyptian wing. In fact, a lot of Palestinians under Nasser went to Egypt, got trained.
Yeah,
Number of I know a number of Palestinian engineers when the Gulf started to develop. All those engineers got jobs over there. So there's a lot. On the other hand, we have this internal contradiction in Egypt that the Muslim Brotherhood and the Hamas is kind of an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. So
definitely.
Sisi's sitting on top of a volcano there. How do you see a number of specific? For example, the Americans put tremendous pressure on Egypt to try to get them to take in the refugees from Gaza, and they even looked for a while that maybe they would be succeed. I understand there were offers of loans from the World Bank and so on and so forth. But on that case, Egypt actually stood firm. Why?
Egypt actually what?
Stood firm. It didn't do it.
Yes,
Didn't
that's
allow
right.
that. So
Well, again, I mean, when you sup with the devil, which is dealing with Israel, it has consequences, and even more so in Egypt than in Saudi Arabia. partly far more than Saudi Arabia, because you've got a vastly larger population, vastly greater economic disparity and poverty, and people who have lots of grievances against the regime, not even talking yet about Gaza or Palestinians.
So you're making a distinction on that level with Saudi, where the princes are sitting on all this money, and if there's unrest, the combination of repression and providing them economic benefits, they can keep things under control. Where Egypt doesn't have that extra pot of money to help.
That's right. Now, on top of that, I mean, nobody knows how many Palestinian refugees would come into Egypt, but it'd probably be many, many thousands. And I think not just Egypt, but in general, Palestinians would be viewed as a destabilizing element,
Mm.
political element, social element within Egypt and countries surrounding it. That is not what any of these leaders want.
Right.
They want stability, firmness, and hold on to their seats.
So
So
here's
I think if you got a whole lot of Palestinians coming in who will be disruptive, hungry, jobless, uh, angry, they could help stir be a spark for broader political and social and economic
right.
discontent within Egypt that Sisi is not going to screw around with. He doesn't. He's first of all, thank you very much for unloading your Palestinian problem on us. He's not going to do that. He's not going to accept it. And you could argue objectively that from his perspective, that is smart because it might really become a deeper
Well,
destabilizing element there.
i- i-
More there than anywhere else.
if you look at historically, when Palestinians were pushed into Jordan, then they started to use Jordan as a base from which to try to organize their return, and Israel attacks Jordan, and or forces the Jordanian regime to attack same thing with Lebanon. So, can imagine if significant numbers of Palestinians were forced into Egypt, but their main objective is how do we get back, and then Egypt would be under pressure from the Israelis to stop them. So this could be a mess for Egypt.
Yeah, and Egypt, Washington, I don't think would not want. I mean, the whatever I forget the name of the accords that were signed between Israel and Egypt quite some years back. You remember with the Egyptian. I'm sorry, I'm blanking at the moment.
Camp David Accords.
Yes, yes.
Thanks
Those
so
were
much.
very hard won. They
Yeah,
were long negotiations,
right.
difficult at a time when Israel was far easier to deal with, vastly more rational leadership
Mm,
at that time.
mm.
It's going to be hard to reproduce those circumstances, and I don't think Washington would want to have to go back in and try to recreate those conditions for yet another new settlement in with Egypt. It just can't. It's costly. It's costly, and
Sure.
Egypt doesn't. And Egypt has a lot of money to lose. The U.S. gives a good $1 billion or more every year to the Egyptian economy, the military, whatever else. And in Egypt does not want to lose that money, which it might if it angers Washington by anti-Israeli commentary.
You're a little ways out of the CIA now, but I'm sure there are CIA people in Egypt work now. They're watching to see whether or not there is any potential for a Nasser-like revolt inside the Egyptian army, because I assume there are lots of nationalist and Egyptian military officers. That's where the colonels are the ones that you always want to watch out for. Do you know anything about that? Have you heard any echoes on that? Or uh,
No, I haven't beat her directly, as you say. I'm some distance away from it, but I think, of course, I mean, it goes without saying that would be high on the list of what any CIA station should be doing is monitoring that kind of discontent. And the former discontent and coups are gonna. I mean, it's like the old Willie Sutton thing about why do you rob banks? It's because the money is there. Why do you support the military? Because that's a source of coups. So
right.
I would guess coups, a military coup is not remotely out of the picture in Egypt, depending on how bad things get, or how incompetent, or not, or
Right,
how clever Sisi is in staying in power. But
right.
it's a tricky game.
Okay, let's turn to the fourth country, which is again very different. Again, Iran is a 1,000-year civilization. Persian Empire dominated the large parts of that area for a long time. Had a revolution in 1953, which was overthrown by the CIA, a coup, and then another revolution in 79. Is that right? Then when the Islamists came to power. Now, um, I think some people who are pro-Palestinian were hoping that Iran would get involved and try to defend the Palestinians, particularly since apparently it said, I believe it to be true, that Iran provided some military help to Hamas early on. Although I've always been puzzled about how that actually happens, how they actually get weapons into Gaza, but whatever. So the question then is Iran likely to do more, or are they just helping the Hamas because it's really a way to weaken Israel? How do you see Iran in this issue?
Just one tiny corrective points that I think would be important in Iranian eyes. I mean, they would probably claim their civilization demonstrably goes back maybe 5,000 years, and it's
Okay.
the oldest single civilization. And I believe, I haven't seen the statistics, probably the largest Muslim country in the entire region, with deep skills in statesmanship that are quite unique. The Iranians are remarkably sophisticated people. They've seen it all. They've been around the block. They know how to play the game, and I think their importance cannot be underestimated. Also, I would just add, because I think in another context it's even more important. CIA, yes, helped overthrow Mossadegh, the first democratically elected leader they ever had in the country. But let's not forget that this was heavily supported, if not pushed heavily, by MI6, the British intelligence organization. And I lay emphasis on that because I think we can see now in many places around the world a very nasty, malign British MI6 influence in false flag operations, anything to stir up trouble. And we see this in spades in Ukraine. So I think the combination of American and British intelligence in this has been a very baleful negative force in the area. And we didn't, I guess, mention, but it's obvious Iran is not an Arab country, which makes it quite unique, along with Turkey, as being non-Arab, strong pro-Palestinian supporters. What do they want? I would argue many things. Certainly, I think the Islamic Republic does have a serious ideology of, I mean, it's an old Shiite value, if you will, to have justice, Islamic justice in the world. I think they strongly feel that justice is not being served in Palestine. Most of us might agree, and they want very much to see justice served, and they want to show that their clout matters, that their Islamic perspective, including their ability to stand firm, arm themselves, fight hard, uh, be tough, be a tough country. All of those are quite involved. So I don't think this is posturing at all. But there's one other aspect of this that I'm sure you're well aware of as well. Not all Iranians are great fans of Arabs. On the contrary, it's very common to meet Iranians who are very angry with Arabs. That goes way back. I mean, first of all, the Arabs overthrew the Persian Empire going back several thousand years ago. So that's a little money, a little problem from the past. But I think they see Arab influence, and especially Arab Islamic influence, as holding Iran back from what at least the secularists in Iran would like to see. And I think they would be happy to see the overthrow of the Islamic regime, but not all Iranians by any means. There are elements of social justice, etc. So by no means is it a cynical
Okay.
posturing on the part of
Well,
Iran to
so
have concern.
two kind of practical questions. We are told repeatedly, citing Iranian sources, that they want to wipe out Israel. How do you decode that?
Good question. I think, and I'm sure emotionally it corresponds to some reality. I'm sure there are many people in the West, not e- uh, who have very little love for Israel and feel that the world would be better off if Israel did not exist, from the point of view of at least the value of Islamic lives. But I I think you have to take it in perhaps the context of American senators sitting around and talking about how we want to dismantle Russia. We want to dismantle Soviet Union. We did with a little help from Soviet problems, but people who are going to be outspoken and say, "Yeah, we hate this state. We don't want it, and we wish it would come to an end." And I
Now
think in that sense.
that's interpreted by the Zionists and the Friends of Israel as meaning, if Iran got a nuclear bomb, they would land it on Tel Aviv and kill all the Jews. That's kind of the way it's read here.
Sure, but I mean, every country that gets threatened in these ways will claim that that's the goal. I don't. I would take that with a huge grain of salt. I mean, yeah, in the heat of sorry,
Got a good picture of your crotch there for a second, Graham.
you don't see me though.
Now I see if you use my
So
nose up. There you go.
there you
All
go.
right.
It's
We're talking
there's
about,
a lot of bad blood there,
yeah.
and I'm sure many ugly things are going to be have been and will be exchanged back and forth when it comes to looking at horrendous pictures
Okay. Can you
coming out of
try to
Gaza.
readjust your camera just a bit, because we only see you from your mustache up. So just right. That's okay. We'll stay there. Will that work?
Um,
That's better if you can make it stay there.
if it doesn't fall, no promises.
Okay, all right, that's fine. All right, so we've now done kind of a tour d'horizon. I'd like to open it up to questions from everybody in the audience. I've already seen a number of comments on chat. Grafton Ross is in the background. He's been monitoring Q&A. I see David Halton, former Canadian, well-known CBC journalist, has raised his hand. And David, if I can figure out how to do this, I will let you ask the first question. Hang on for a second. David, where are you, David? I don't see you on my list here, though I'm sure you are, David. Oh, here we go. Hang on. David Halston. Okay, allowed to talk. There you go, David. Speak up.
Can you hear me, Peter?
I can, just barely, though.
Well, first of all, thanks for Mr. Fuller for a very, very useful and informative talk. I don't want to take you off topic, but I've been struck by the lack of concern or outrage among Arab governments over the fact that the so-called ceasefire is falling apart almost every day. Israel seems to be continuing the same kind of shooting of civilians that we've seen over the past 2 years. Um, is that because the Western media here are not reporting what the Arab governments are saying about it? That's one question. The other one is more broadly, is there any real confidence that the so-called ceasefire will hold among the fellow Arab governments?
I don't think that there's very much hope at all that it will hold. I mean, all the serious commentators who read the text of this agreement said that it was just riddled with exceptions and difficulties to be taken very seriously. And meanwhile, the world has moved on from a 23-point program to a 28-point program in Ukraine. So, but I don't want to be utterly dismissive. If it's just possible that it could mean that at least within certain elements of the Israeli government, that there is an acknowledgement that some kind of agreement is ultimately going to have to be reached, or else essentially Israel is really on a long range suicide run. Indeed, many think that. So I wouldn't utterly dismiss it, but I don't see much groundwork for a longer term thing. But again, we just when I was talking with Peter, Turkey is very interested in coming in and serving as a peacekeeping force there as well. I don't think Israel would remotely welcome Turkey and distrust Turkey's goodwill towards Israel, but it maybe provides a few basic footholds for deeper discussion rather than having none. But you're right. The outrage of having a so-called peace settlement or ceasefire that is followed up by daily murderous attacks against Palestinians is truly shocking.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you for raising that. Grafton, do you have some questions to pitch to Graham from either the Q&A or from the chat function?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yes.
Good. One of our listeners asks, what is your opinion of what is the role that Qatar is playing? It seems to be playing both sides, supporting Muslim Brotherhood on one hand, but hosting a major U.S. naval facility on the other.
Yeah, well, Qatar is playing both sides against the middle, and I'm going to have to say I very much respect the state of Qatar because it has broken the mold. It has stepped outside of what the usual expectations or demands are from Washington as to what to do. They're one of the few groups that has been willing to sit down and try to address various Islamist groups, including the Muslim Brotherhood. And here I'm going to have to maybe say a few things that might upset a few people, but I do not view the Muslim Brotherhood as necessarily this horrendous terrorist organization. Yes, it's Islamist. Yes, it has ultimately probably more extreme views towards Israel. On the other hand, it's a fairly sophisticated organization. It's been around a long time. It knows how to negotiate and furthermore, there is not going to be any peaceful settlement in the region that does not include some force like the Islamic Muslim Brotherhood in the Middle East. The Muslim Brotherhood represents an ideological Islamic force that is trying to restore or preserve Palestine. You're not going to be able to eliminate these people. You're not going to be able to eliminate, let's say, Hezbollah. And Hezbollah is far more violent and far more capable militarily than the Muslim Brotherhood is. So I would argue that Qatar is one of the few states that's willing to face reality as it is and acknowledges that the region is going to have to deal with Islamist movements that feel they have a stake in this, as many Palestinians do themselves.
Thank you. Thank you. Graham, Grafton, another one?
Can you speak a little bit about Iraq? Iraq must have a rather complex relationship with Israel, with Jews living, with a large number of Jews living peaceably there prior to 1948.
Yes, well, as you know, too, Iraq is particularly important because it has a Shiite majority. There's a tendency, I think, on the part of the West to try to assume something like Sunni good guys, Shiite bad guys, Iran bad guy, Egypt Sunni good guy, Saudi Arabia good guy, etc. The West has grossly overplayed the significance of Shiite Sunni differences over the years, over the centuries. There are significant differences. Very little of it has to do with Islamic belief. Yes, there are ideological, theological differences, but essentially we're talking about communities, communitarian values, and the Shiite community is a very ancient one in the region and expects to play a major role. So when you've got majority Shiites in Iraq, you are going to automatically find a greater closeness to Iran than you might otherwise find to be the case. I would guess there's a lot of sympathy among Shiites in Saudi Arabia, excuse me, in Iraq for that. It's not a zero-sum game, and it's worth pointing out that Hamas is a Sunni organization, it's a Muslim Brotherhood organization, which is very, very Sunni. And yet here is Shiite Egypt, Shiite Iran fully supporting the Sunni basis of Hamas. So these distinctions should not be overdrawn as being a key to where players are going to go. Both Shiites and Sunnis are outraged by what's going on
Right.
in the area, and you're not going to be able to overcome it or play off one side against the other, even though MI6 especially works very, very hard at that game.
Yeah. I see that Jake Javanshire has raised his hand. He's been waiting patiently for a while. So, Jake, do you want to speak up? I'll allow you to talk. There you go.
Yes, I would like to say something about Iran and the belief that if they get the nuclear armament, the first thing they will send it on Israel. I understand why Israel says so, why US says so, and other Arab countries, because they just don't like Iran to be a power. US and Israel will not ever let any power rise up there, real power, that will be comparable to Israel or something like that. That's one thing. But I do not understand the people all over the world who believe that if Iran has nuclear, first thing they will just throw it on Israel. Israel has over 2 million Palestinians, 3 million or more in West Bank, and all Muslims surrounding it. So though they will kill a few million Muslims and Palestinians, doesn't make any sense at all. And more so, if Iran throws something on Israel, US, Israel, and Britain, and all, Canada, everybody, they will wipe out Iran in 1 hour. So does this make any sense what people believe? That Iran, if it does it, it's for deterrent, nothing else.
Of course, but deterrence matters a very, very great deal in many, many countries. I'm sure that Iran wishes that it already had a nuclear bomb for those precise reasons that you state of deterrence. Now, you're right. I think many Israelis have good reason to worry about the acquisition of a nuclear weapon on the part of Israel. There are long debates within the nuclear community as to whether when two countries have nuclear weapons, that the chances of war breaking out are much less. That's at least one argument. It's been pointed out that India and Pakistan have had, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 wars over their history, but ever since they both got bombs, there's been no nuclear anything, and there even talk of that kind of thing. This is a legitimate problem. I am afraid, in my view anyway, and you may not agree, but I think Israel is determined to create a greater Israel that is going to include not only Gaza, but probably parts of the Sinai, large parts of Syria, possibly certainly much of Jordan, other parts. How much should the Arab world and the region world sit aside and allow Israel to establish that position there in giving the argument that Israel cannot be safe unless everybody else is unsafe. This is you put your finger on a very important issue. There is no easy answer for this. I mean, we also might say, when you look at North Korea, I can't think of a more potentially irresponsible government in the world, perhaps, than North Korea and Kim Jong-un. But yet we decide that somehow we're going to have to live with this. I'm afraid that Israel, if Israel continues to exist, and there are some in Israel who even worry about that, not just Iran, but in general. If Israel continues to exist, they are not going to be able to enjoy a monopoly, absolute monopoly over all power of sovereignty over the whole region. The region won't accept that. And so Israel is going to have to come to some terms with Iran, but Washington itself, as you know, has proven unwilling to get back into nuclear discussions with Iran, which matter a great deal. It's a very potentially good deal to try to keep some balance between the two. But Israel will never be able to, in my mind, be able to maintain regional hegemony across the Middle East.
Thank you. Grafton, have you got a couple more? I'm sure there's some people out there, either in the chat or in the Q&A, who want to ask.
Yes. One of our participants wonders what the role Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency, plays in the region in terms of destabilizing countries.
Yes, I only laugh because I think it is a formidable power in that regard. There are a lot of people in Israel who write about these geopolitical questions. It's very clear that Israel believes that its future is hegemony throughout the Middle East. And furthermore, that would be based on a Middle East that is made up of minorities, small minorities that can be relatively easily managed, played off against each other, and permitting the Israelis to totally dominate the area. But there are counter views.
Let me just clarify. I understand there has been some talk about Israel's desire to break Syria up into a Kurdish area and so on. And I've even heard some talk about trying to break up Iran. There's a lot of something like 50% of Iranians are Persian, but there's quite a few other minorities that aren't Persian, and I guess some dream of trying to break up Iran as well. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, indeed. There's been open discussion of that issue on the part of Israel for quite some time. That would probably also apply, let's say, to Turkey, which is a little more homogeneous ethnically, but still not that much. And if you're looking for pressure points, which is what MI6 in particular is specialized in over hundreds of years, how to find devices, splitting points where you can divide this group against the other group, there's more than enough material to work with. So I just don't think that's a very healthy way for Israel to express its long-term aspirations. And just, one other thought on this. Some have said that Israel essentially represents a foreign antibody in a fundamentally Islamic region for hundreds of years, and that foreign antibody will ultimately be expelled unless it can be absorbed. Not it absorbing the region, but the region absorbing it in some way or other.
Well, there's good reason to think of Israel in the kind of like a reprise of the Crusades, a projection of European power in that region, and the Crusades was to try to make it all Christian, and the idea that Christianity originated there, and so we have the right to do it. And then the Israel sort of 1,000 years later with the same kind of argumentation.
That's exactly right. But I think if in this era of Belt and Road initiatives, BRICS initiatives, Global South emergence, we're crazy if we think that there's somehow going to be a restoration of Western neo-imperialism in the region, which is what Israel today does represent. I use that term not as an insult, but simply an historical fact of non-regional people, probably white people, European people, coming in to take over another country and make it a colony for good. Those days are gone, and certainly China and Russia and India, many other states simply will not tolerate that for much longer.
Grafton, if you have time, maybe you can look up. Graham has written a very interesting book with the title that shocked me when I first read it. It's called The World Without Islam. And I took it at first to mean that he thought Islam should go away. But in the book, he argues that we see this as a fight between Islam and the West. But in fact, the contradictions are deeper. And even if Orthodox Christianity had taken over the region, we'd probably be having similar kinds of struggles. It's a fascinating book and worth exploring. So,
thank you.
Grafton, have you got another question?
Yes, I do. And I've just posted some links to some of Graham Fuller's books in the chat.
Okay. That wasn't the one I was referring to, but there are several. So it's easily.
Yes, well, the future of political Islam, a world without Islam.
Yeah, a world without Islam was the one I was talking about. They're all worth reading. Okay.
Yeah.
Question.
The link is there. How do Arab publics view the Turkish government? And this, well, currently, and I guess with the history of the Ottoman Empire and its control of the region.
Yeah, great question. And there's no easy answer, but as an historian, I tend to look back and find signals from the past that might be clues to the future. I think it's impossible to dismiss Turkey as anything other than a major regional player. And as I say in there, they discovered themselves, ironically, under a very creative foreign minister, Ahmet Davutoglu, some, 30 years ago, who just said, look, stop talking about Turkey as a loyal NATO ally. We're not a loyal NATO ally. We'll work with NATO, but we're Mediterranean, we're Balkan, we're Middle Eastern, we're Central Asian, we're all of these different things, and they're going to insist, I think, on playing in all those various fora for a long-term role, and its importance can never be excluded. It's simply too sophisticated, too old, too competent a culture to be playing some small role as a loyal NATO ally. I mean, that's the Ashbin of history.
But they do have the largest military in NATO, apart from the U.S., as I understand, right?
I think that's the case, but you never know it to see it.
Yeah. Grafton.
I'm going to skip over a couple and ask you to expand a little bit further on the role that China is currently playing or might play in the future.
I'm going to disallow that question. I'm sorry, unless this would have focused on why. Remember, the subject of the webinar is why is it that the Arab countries aren't supporting the Palestinians more? So if
can I give just 1 minute?
Okay, no, if your answer is germane to it, then that's fine. Go on.
No, I'm very interested. But I mean, as we know, China is an extraordinary new player on the block now. Every 10 years, there's remarkable developments. I think China's commitment to the Belt and Road, to the BRICS, its style of economic aid, the fact that it is not seeking out enemies, but seeking out allies not allies, seeking out people they can work with economically in a new world order really suggests that a new game, very new game, is at work out there, and you cannot possibly exclude it. China has already said they're concerned about, say, Venezuela.
How does that affect the Arab world's posturing on this?
Posturing on.
How does China's entrance into this change the dynamic of the Arab world vis-a-vis the Palestinians and the Israelis?
I think it greatly strengthens the Arab hand, the third world hand, the sort of global South hand, uh, the a new kind of world order. It strengthens all of those people, the Brazils, the Iran, the Indians. So. I see this as a formidable force in helping shape future geopolitics in the area. Russia is certainly important too, but Russia is already badly bogged down and, if you will, partially compromised by its war in Ukraine. But but China has managed to maintain a certain kind of balance there, and it has formidable economic values to offer to the region. So I might say it's perhaps one of the single most important new players in
China,
there.
China did help negotiate some kind of peace agreement between Iran and Saudi, and presumably that strengthens the hands of both those governments in terms of dealing with the United States and dealing with Israel. Is that what you
Yeah,
said?
absolutely. I was astonished when I saw that China was able to pull off a reconciliation because the usual Western Arabist view was, oh, this is an eternal struggle between Sunnis and Shiites. It'll never happen. Well, the Chinese solved it fairly fast, and partly on the basis, which is my argument, that these are issues that are not fundamentally theological, but communitarian and interests that can be resolved if approached from that direction.
Okay, thank you. Grafton?
I think China also hosted a meeting of the different Palestinian political factions and uh, and hosted an agreement between them uh, on moving forward. Um, One of our listeners is asking about the fate of Israeli Jews if should Israel become decolonized. They're wondering, are there any Middle Eastern states that have laws that do not discriminate between Muslims and non-Muslims?
Well, of course, the Arab world has had a fairly good history of relations between Jews and Arabs, Jews and Muslims, going back some time. It was mainly the creation of Israel, forcible creation of Israel in many ways, that helped damage that. So I think the question of Israel's future is quite wide open. I'm not prepared to take sides. I don't know enough about it, but people whom I respect do say that there are serious questions about whether Israel is a viable nation over the long run. And as you may know, lots and lots of Israelis are now emigrating, leaving Israel for other places, simply because some of it economic, but mostly because they are too horrified by the implications of internal Israeli politics. And one last fascinating viewpoint on this, if when I ask people, can you guess what country that most of these Jews who are leaving Israel for good, can you guess where they're going? Germany.
Another question, Grafton.
Can you speak to the tension or the disconnect between the Arab governments in power and the popular sentiment, the street? When will the dam break and what will be the contributing factors?
Of the present Arab regimes in power.
Yeah, the disconnect between the positions the governments are taking and the popular sentiment on the street in their
Yeah,
countries.
well, that's a very good question. And actually, I'm amazed that I hadn't brought this up earlier, but it was high on my list. The reasons why many Arab states, most Arab states, let's say, don't like the Palestinians, are afraid of them, hate them, is because Palestine represents popular will. It's the drive of people who are angry, unhappy with the status quo, who want to change things. Why do things have to be this way? They would criticize their local Arab leaders for not sufficiently supporting this. They are opening up the kind of rigidities, political rigidities and control that most of these Gulf states and others are trying to impose on their people. So most Arab leaders are really quite terrified of the idea of just, people running wild, demanding liberation, demanding freedom, demanding better economic outlook, futures for themselves. This is very volatile, and I don't think there's an Arab state out there that feels they can handle it or want to have it, want to handle it, or that their populations will not very quickly go from what is pro-Palestinian action into anti-regime action in other states. Very important factor.
I recently heard Ambassador Charles Freeman say something of a similar nature. He said the last thing we're not talking about Turkey or Iran, but those dictatorships that exist. The last thing they want to see is a powerful, a democratic Palestine, because that would be an incentive for their own people to sort of rise up. And so they would much rather see Hamas crushed than seeing a free and democratic Palestine.
Absolutely.
Grafton, we got time for a couple
Yes.
more questions, or anybody who wants to can raise their hand as well.
Sure. A question from the chat. Why is Canada willing to sacrifice its relationships with the Arab countries in the Middle East in order to support Israel, which, in your view, is a lost cause?
Very good question. I ask myself that same question very often. You might more broadly ask that question as to why Arab states are not willing to put any pressure on Washington or very limited pressure on Washington. And I think I began much of this discussion this evening saying they can't, they won't, they're afraid to. I mean, if Israel is unhappy and goes to any president of the United States, basically, and says, look, we don't like what Egypt is doing. We don't like Turkey, Iran, or whatever else. You can be sure that Washington can exert very serious pressure against existing regimes and even threaten their stability if they don't toe the line. So unfortunately, American ownership of this entire issue means that almost everybody else is excluded from a voice in this issue if they wish to maintain good ties with the U.S., whether it's economic or military. If Saudi Arabia is worried about their own security, Washington could say, well, we don't see seriousness on your part vis-a-vis Israel. That's a powerful argument. That's one of the reasons I think perhaps why Saudi Arabia, in the final analysis, ended up turning to Pakistan to possibly gain a nuclear umbrella because it doesn't trust or is fearful that the U.S. might cut them off. They don't have autonomy. I started this evening by saying we're still in a post-colonial period. I don't know how post, but in a period in which these economic controls, political, economic, otherwise geopolitical controls still exist and still highly limit the freedom of maneuver of regional states to take it upon the states, upon themselves to take on Washington.
Couple more, Grafton, and then we're going to wind her up.
Actually, I don't have any open questions that I
Okay.
see right now.
Does anybody want to raise their hand and ask questions? Remember, our focus for this evening is on the question about why the Arab nations aren't more supportive of the Palestinians. I see someone asked about when you were station chief in Afghanistan. What years you were station chief there? Can you tell us that?
Yeah, that was the years just before the Soviet invasion. When would that be? Late 70s.
Right.
Yes, I must say we're not entirely that we were a bit taken aback by the fact that the Soviet Union did invade to protect the first communist regime that had ever appeared
Right.
in Afghanistan.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna there are two more people with their hands up, and I'm gonna wind up there. The first one is Isla Patterson. Do you want to ask a question? And then I see that Michelle Haddad has a hands up as well. Isla?
Yes, I just wanted to ask if you could comment about the Houthis, who seem to be so persistent in the support to the Palestinians.
Great question, and it's one of the many unknown, inexplicable issues in part. I lived in Yemen for 2 years. It's a dirt poor country, wonderful people, but it's a rough country. It's had a rough history. It's been brutalized by Saudi Arabia over the past many years. Other countries have tried to brutalize it, but I, and they are, of course, they're Shiite, so they accept more readily some of Iran's own Shiite views on the nature of the oppressiveness of the system, international system against the Palestinians and the Houthis. I mean, I should mention the Shiites are very big on pressure and brutalization, in particular, of just causes. It rings very true to them. It rings very true in not Saudi Arabia, in Iran. So they just seem to have the guts somehow, amazingly, to be able to stand up, receive quite severe punishment from Washington, who essentially decided it was a bit too risky to continue that game because the Houthis can even close down the Straits of Hormuz to oil shipment. So I have to attribute it to a great gutsiness, and a country that has much less to lose than some of these fatter cats that live higher up the Gulf.
Interesting question. Thank you. Thank you, Graham, and thank you, Isla, for that question. Michelle Haddad, you're going to be the last one to ask a question tonight, so make it a good one.
Okay, just sorry, I don't know if you can hear me or can
You can, yep.
Yes,
I
yes.
just wanted to go back to something that you had mentioned, Graham, that I believe you said that Israel might, in the long term, be a suicide run if a settlement is not reached with the Palestinians, I assume. Can you explain that, please? Expand on that?
Well, these are all very theoretical issues, and this is not even mostly my views, but looking at what serious Israeli thinkers, obviously very liberal, forward-looking liberal thinkers in Israel, but the main question being that Israel has almost irreparably damaged its reputation as a pariah as a result of this inconceivable war. I mean, I don't think there's an Israeli observer out there that would have felt that it would come to where we are at, and it's still not over. So I think if it comes to a confrontation with Iran, if I were Israel, I would be a bit nervous about taking on the Iranians. They are tough people. They have lived through lots of hardships. They're ideologically committed. You find lots of Israelis leaving Israel now to move to Germany or other European places, maybe elsewhere in the West. And if there's another exchange of, excuse me, my voice is, if there's another exchange of missiles between between Iran and Israel. Last time around, apparently the damage against Israeli installations were far more serious than Israel ever admitted. But Washington has slowly been acknowledging this. And it was Israel, the powerful Israel, the nuclear Israel, that finally came to Washington and asked to help arrange a ceasefire. So it does suggest that there's a lot of risks for Israel if they want to go into a longer term war. And as I suggested, I think Israel maybe realistically understands that Iran is the one state more than any other that could theoretically threaten Israel's existence. Not because they're going to get a bomb and throw it at Israel the next day. I don't believe that. I think both sides would be very careful and possibly might even reach some kind of modus vivendi and discussion. People don't just get a weapon and throw it. Kim Jong-un in North Korea has not done anything like that. So who knows? But Israel is in uncharted waters here in its boldness of its territorial ambitions, the degree to which it seeks to be regional hegemon over state after state after state after state, some of them very serious states, and a United States ally that is weakening as younger generations of Americans and even some Europeans, I think, are appalled by what is happening and simply don't want the United States to be committed and compromised to be dragged into each and every war that Israel wants to launch.
Well, to say nothing of the declining support that Israel is getting in America amongst American Jews as well. So, Graham, thank you so much for sharing your insight and intelligence with us. You have a vast experience in the region that none of us have had or will have. So we appreciate your time. Grafton, Ross, thank you very much in the background for pitching the questions, monitoring what was going on. I apologize to anybody whose questions didn't get asked. Maybe we can try to lean on Graham to come back again at some point in the future. We can further the discussion. But it's now 8:45 Ottawa time, and I think we'll wind up here. So thank you very much for the attendees, and I will be sending you a follow-up email with a link to this video so that you can share it with others if you want. I will also remind you that OFIP is a voluntary organization. We have minor costs. We have a couple of $100, $300, $400 worth of costs every month. So minor contributions are most welcome. Just send in by an e-transfer. That will be in the email following us. So that would be great. And suggestions for further webinars are also very welcome. So I think I've covered off everything. Thank you very much again, Graham, Grafton, and good evening to everybody.
Thank you, Peter. It was a very interesting discussion. The questions are excellent and worth pondering more than once.
Thank you very much.